Fun, great. So this is perfect because it looks like Stan is joining us, and I'm sure Janie will be here soon. So anyway, this is my friend Anna Estrada, and she she's down in Peru now. No, it looks like it. She lives in Brevard, and she actually rented. She stayed at one of my vacation rentals, and a year and a half ago. And we finally said, well, we seem to have a little bit in common because we talked just a little bit, you know. And we went out and we go, oh my gosh, these people, you know, when you connect with somebody, it's like, this is so cool. And then she came back last winter. She was here all winter, and she is just a wonderful, deep spiritual person. And I'm glad she's in my circle. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Luanne. It was really a blessing to meet you and connect with all the wonderful people that you are involved with here in Brevard. So you really helped me feel at home here. And so thank you. And so tonight, you know, Luanne invited me to share a little bit about some of my experience in Peru, because I'm trained as an art historian, and I used to work for an art museum, and as part of my master's thesis, I did a lot of work and research in Peru. And I noticed that the title of the talk was The Wisdom of the Andes on the web page. But we're going to talk about the Amazon tonight, but it's very similar, because what we're talking about, and I can share, I lived in the Sacred Valley of Peru as well. I spent a lot of time there as well, and which is close to Machu Picchu, which is in the Andean Sierra. And then the area of the Amazon that I studied in and worked with the people there is the Upper Amazon, and that's outside of a city called Pucallpa. And so I have a lot of experience with Peru, and the main thing that I wanted to share about is, you know, this shamanic worldview that I really engaged with and learned about in my time there, in my connections that I made with the people who are descended, you know, from the Native American traditions. And so the main thing that is so helpful today, that is in that training that I had in the jungle, in the Amazon, it's all about this very profound and deep connection and communication with the earth. And that's like the foundation of the shamanic teachings, is this very the reciprocity between the human world and the earth, and the earth is seen as a living, breathing entity. So you know, we call her Gaia and in the Andes we call her Pachamama. And so there's this devotion and this interaction with the earth in this way, as an entity that's alive and that nourishes the people, and there's this interaction with the earth. And so in the shamanic worldview, we're functioning in different dimensions in our everyday life. And that was another thing that was really important for me to understand and learn about, that there is, and I'm wearing, this is a very important symbol. It's, I don't know if you can see it, the chacana, and it's a cross. It's called the Andean cross, but you see it also in the Amazon. And so the cross has 3 levels that you'll see in the design. And that's a reference to the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. And so the lower world is, and the animal that symbolizes the lower world is the snake, and it's all about the unconscious and going into the, you know, these different realms of where we have so many tendencies that, you know, that we inherit, that we are educated in a certain way, conditioning. And so there's all kinds of patterns there that when we do the shamanic work, a lot of the work is about unraveling those patterns so that we can go more deeply into that, you know, pure source of who we are inside, beyond these conditionings and these thought patterns and perceptions that are learned, you know, that are conditioned into the conscious mind. So that's a way to, there are different ways, different techniques that the shamans use to go into that underworld, to support you as you travel through that underworld. And it's like a cleansing process. So in the Native American culture, there's all kinds of, the spiritual traditions are so much about purifying and cleansing the inner quantum field, and learning how to raise the vibration of the body, the density, you know, clearing the density that's held in the body, from unprocessed emotions and from maybe traumas from the past, or unprocessed, you know, disturbances and shocks that we've had in our lives that we didn't have the tools to process. And so all of that accumulates in the inner world. And so the shamanic work is very much about clearing and purifying and cleansing. So things like sweat lodge and vision quest and those types of things that we may be more familiar with in North America, that's the purpose, is to put us in, you know, put ourselves in a situation that's really out of our comfort zone. And then all of these tendencies have the space to reveal themselves and to come forth. And then we're able to unravel and kind of recalibrate our system. And then there's the middle world, which is our everyday life. And so the way we work with that, and again, it's, there's so many opportunities that we have right now to work with this, because many times in our everyday life, in the present time, we will get triggered. We can get emotionally triggered. And if we have those unconscious, unprocessed emotions, sometimes these triggers are supercharged emotionally. Like we may have a response or a reaction to an outer event or a comment that somebody makes in the outer world, and it may trigger a very strong emotional response. And that it's really great when that happens, and because that is the primary way in everyday life that the unconscious reveals itself. And so then we have the opportunity to face those emotions and experience those emotions. And that softens them if we have the tools to do it, and to bring it back inside. And then we have the upper world, which is the these higher and it's all about energy and vibration in the shamanism. And so in the upper world, that's where we're able to communicate with beings of light that are not in the body, that are, you know, spirit guides and ascended masters and different lineages and that are supporting us. And in Peru, we work with different star systems, and that bring forth different vibrations and different frequencies that we can work with and that support us. And so that's how we work with the upper world. And so in the Amazon, there's a process called the dieta, which is that you actually go into the jungle, and it's like this. So here we are. It's just a very dense, very lush forest in the Amazon, and so as part of my research, so I was very academic. My whole thing was about my academic writing and my degree, And I went in, and so I had a very solid foundation, mentally, intellectually. And I always, and spiritually, I've been hearing my whole life, the kingdom of God is within you, and God is inside you. And but I wasn't really having that experience. It was an intellectual, it was a thought, it was a belief, but I wasn't having, and I had glimpses of it, but it wasn't something that I was not sustained in that experience. I was in and out. And so part of the work that we did in the jungle had to do with closing the gap, between matter and spirit, so that the spirit becomes embodied. And what happens, and then there's that fusion between spirit and matter. The spirit becomes embodied. And that's when the body becomes a temple, because the spirit fully manifests inside the physical vessel. Because many times the spirit will leave the body, even though you're alive and walking around. They talk about this in the Western world a lot, the mind-body connection. And so what I learned from the shaman is that if we have a lot of pain and unresolved issues and emotional issues from the past, many times where we can be leaving the body, because the spirit cannot stay in the physical vessel, and because there's so much density, and the spirit is vibrating at a very high frequency. So the work in the jungle and in many of these traditions is to raise the vibration of the body, to release the density that doesn't allow us to experience fully that divine source that's inside. And so it's a process. It's not anything that happens overnight. It's a process. It's a spiritual process. And I'm sure everybody here is engaged with that process. And that it's, it's this spiral of growth, so that we're always kind of circling around to going deeper, and and engaging with these different dimensions in our inner world. And so when we went into the jungle, we did this process called the dieta. And that is when you go, you work with the shaman one-on-one in the jungle, and you go in there for about 2 weeks. And it's usually 14 days, and then you do ceremony with the shaman. And there's other people there. There were other people there, but you are, this particular shaman had this, we all arrived into the city of Pucallpa, and then it was about 10 of us. And so from there, we took a canoe into the river, and about 3 hours, we were in 3 different canoes. And then we arrived at his land. He had a sanctuary there. And so each person is assigned their own space. It's an open air. It's called a tambo. It's like an open air. It's like a platform with a roof, and it's completely open. And then you have a hammock in there. And there's no plumbing, there's no shower, there's no, we had, an outhouse. Each little hut had its little outhouse. And so it was really hardcore for me. It really was scary to, in the whole planning process, brought up so much fear. And that was part of the process. And then plus, there was no communication. There was no phone, there's no computer, there's no email. nothing. And so that was a big deal for me as a person from Florida going to Peru into the jungle, that I had no communication for 2 weeks with my family, with my son. I had a young son. And at the time, I think he was about 6 years old. And so I was really afraid and I think I canceled a couple of times before I actually went. And what was so amazing is that whole process of going to Peru and going on the canoe and getting to the place. And when I got there, all of that just completely dissolved. And I felt like I was in heaven, because it was so pure, the experience with Gaia, with Mother Nature. And I felt that I was just completely enfolded in this experience of Gaia and the goddess, this feminine experience of the divine as well. And so I just immersed myself in that process. And again, it's these pilgrimages, these types of purification processes. A big part of that is leaving your comfort zone and being in a very unfamiliar place with a very unfamiliar routine. And it's designed that way to bring up the fear and to bring up the feeling of separation, so that we can cleanse and purify that experience of separation and just go deeper and deeper into this inner union. And was the and we had so we would have every other day we would have a ceremony where we worked with the plant medicine, and that was again a very profound process, because we were working with different, throughout the experience, we were working with different plants that helped us integrate with the jungle. And, we weren't allowed to use any kind of chemical like toothpaste or shampoo or soap or insect repellent. So, which was the other scary part for me, because we did get, you were had a lot of bites and things like that. And then you would bathe in the river. And so again, it was just this connection that I experienced with the earth was just very profound. And even when I was covered with bug bites, I felt this peace. I felt, that I was just going deeper into that experience of union, no matter what is happening in the outer world. And that was the big practice that I brought with me from the jungle, is that, because I could see in that situation, since there was not very limited stimulation from the outer world and the human world, I could see how so much of that is self-created by my own fears and my own perceptions and my own beliefs. And so when we would do the ceremony, all of these things that would come up, that probably my biggest fears, my biggest wounds, the things that I didn't even know were there, that were limiting me. And so all of these things would come up in that space. That was the purpose. And so the shaman would always guide us to process internally. And so sometimes we were successful and sometimes we weren't. So if somebody was going through a very deep experience, they might, get up and a lot of emotions coming through. It could be scary. And so we practiced holding space. If we were not in that distress, and we were grounded, and we would hold space for the person that was processing something very heavy or challenging. So again, like, it's something that I practice today in the situation that we're in today, where we're seeing these deep collective wounds coming up to the surface, and huge, it's affecting different people differently. And I just know that my work is to hold space for the transformation of, for the divine to do the work. And so, like, I use those, it's those skills that I learned in the jungle in everyday life now, that, if I have, if I stay in my union, if I stay in that divine connection, in alignment, it's like an alignment with the divine, with the earth, with my own heart, and with the divine source. And I stay very focused on that connection when things get uncomfortable, or things get, there's disruption, and there's fear, and there's events that can be devastating and disturbing. I'm observing something that's devastating, and it's triggering me. And I have that, it's like that response, that default response to connect inside and go into my alignment. Like, that is how I can contribute, because that vibration of connection emanates out into the world and offers support. It's a vibration that offers support to whatever transformation is occurring. So it's like my mind gets out of the way, and I allow this vibration to, and I take care of myself. Of course, that's the first thing I do. What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I need to feel? What is that I need to address in myself? And then I hold space. And I'm supporting the divine transformation in that way. And so that was the main teaching that we learned in the jungle, that it's not outside. The change happens inside. It's an inside job. We say that transformation is an inside job. It's not about changing how other people think in the outer world. It's about changing ourselves, and that shift inside to more clarity and more connection and union, like dissolving that polarity, that emanates like a lighthouse out in the world. Like, it's just a vibration that goes out into the world, and then there's a ripple effect. And that is such an effective way to support transformation. And so, anyway, that's what I just wanted to share with you about the Amazon jungle, what's going on there, and a lot of people that travel there to have that experience. And so, if you have any questions, or you want to share anything or comment on what I offered to you, that would be great.
I wanted to say, Anna, thank you so much. You talk about the body being so dense, and we want to raise our vibrations. And it's curious, this group comes from so many different traditions, and each tradition has a way of raising the vibrations of the vehicle, our body.
Yes.
And anyway, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the technique that the shaman used in actually raising helping you let go of all your stuff and raising the vibration. Was it just the time spent? Was it the ceremony? Was it, the plant medicine? What was it that you feel, or was it all of those things that made you feel lighter and more spiritually connected?
Yeah. So, yes. So the whole thing of going into the jungle and the ceremony, it's like the vessel. It's like this vessel that's created that is a safe space to do this work. And so it's done through, the shaman works with sound. He works with sound. It is not about figuring it out. It's all about going beyond the mind and the emotions. And so the plant medicine facilitates the plant. It's a master plant, and there's this it facilitates, and it is, some of the plants do have these visionary properties. So you do go into a vision state, an altered state. And so, and the purpose of that is to, again, to go beyond the mind, because sometimes the mind is so caught up in trying to figure it out and to understand, and that actually creates resistance. And so it's a way, again, to kind of go beyond that. And then it's done through sound. So it's like this journey through the underworld. And the ceremony with the shaman is usually like about 6 to 8 hours. So you start, we would start probably about 1 o'clock and finish about 9 or 10. And so the whole first part of the ceremony is purging. So the plant will start with a physical purging. In all ways, in any way that you can purge, it will happen. So you have a bucket next to you from the beginning. And so then that immediately brings a relief. You know, that is a big part of releasing that density. And then you'll be going through these different dimensions in the underworld, in the lower world. And again, it's a purification. It's very strong. The sound vibrations become very, very deep and heavy and almost, and it can be, you know, like these very deep drums and rattles, and so again, it's done through sound. And so, and there's this cleansing process that you definitely experience. So memories will come up, memories, feelings will come up as kind of like streams of energy, and that move through you, and you're following the sound, the shaman's song. And there's all kinds of chants and instruments that he uses. And then, so we go through like these different waves of removing that density. And then you know that you're home free when he brings out the flute and the chimes and all these beautiful, very high frequencies, where sometimes it's so intense, the high notes and the high frequency. It's like you're a piano that's being tuned. It's like you're a musical instrument that's being tuned. And sometimes it was almost like, when those high vibrations came forth, it was almost like I couldn't bear it, like so much joy and bliss. It was just like I almost couldn't bear it. And that was the feeling. And so, you know, your heart is opening up, and your energy centers are opened and cleansed, and then you're put back together. So it's like a dismemberment, and then you're put back together. And so that's really beautiful, because at the end of the ceremony, it's like you've been through a marathon. And then you have all these beautiful, he'll sing some beautiful songs, and you just can relax and receive, and you just feel really light, and you just feel this bliss and this love, self-love, that is just coming forth from inside of you. And so it's a really beautiful process. And so that's what we do. That's what we did.
Thank you. I'm sure there are other questions. Does anyone have questions? Because I've got a whole bunch, but I'm going to hold off.
Okay.
Larry, go ahead.
Larry?
You have to
Okay,
unmute.
Larry.
Unmute, Larry.
Hear you.
You're still muted. There you go.
Tell me again your motivation for going to South America, to Peru or the Amazon or whatever.
So I was working as a student in graduate school, and I was studying the art, the visionary art that was created by the women shaman in this particular group called the Shipibo. So that particular group lived in that region, and so I was studying the art. I was studying the textiles and the patterns of the textiles, and these patterns are based on the visions. So they're fractal forms. I don't know if you've seen fractal forms, but or mandalas. Those types of forms are woven into the textiles. So I became very close with one of the women there in Pucallpa, and then I did a ceremony with her, and it's something that I slowly got involved with, and then I was doing research. I actually did a project, a video installation, where I worked with a contemporary artist. I actually contracted a video artist in Florida, and she came with me on one of the trips. I think I went to that area about 5 times in my period of study. And but in that case, in that particular trip, you know, we followed the woman. She was a woman artist and healer, and so we created a whole project around her life and her philosophy and her work, and we actually did an exhibition in Florida of her work. And so in that process is I met a master shaman who lived there in you know, he had that land outside of Pucallpa, and my motivation was, you know, growth. I wanted to have a more consistent experience of this divine presence inside of me. And so it was really just wanting to grow and to have a deeper experience of this inner presence that I was experiencing. And so it really supported me in that, in learning more about that and how to connect with that in a way that was, you know, just really changed my life, the way that I perceived the world around me, the way that I handle my life and make decisions. The way that I learn is completely different as well, because as I shared, I was very academic, and so everything was about reading what's the next book, and you know, I got to get this book, I got to get this book. I learned a lot through reading about other people's experience, and which is great, and I still do that. But this experience, you know, with the shaman, it really taught me how to connect with my own knowledge and my own experience, which is unique, and to really trust my own perception, even if it doesn't, even if it's very different from what I'm reading in a book, you know, or reading about from somebody who has more expertise than I do. I just learned how to in this experience, I learned so much about how to trust myself and trust my own guidance and connect more deeply with my own guidance. So it just brought me back to my life in the US, just to experience that with more authenticity and more just really living from my heart and an authentic experience in my life, you know, more so than doing what I think I'm supposed to do or following a path that I think is the right thing. I know that my choices are right for me in the moment. So
How
it
long
gave
were
me
you
a lot
there?
of confidence.
How long were you there?
So I was there, I lived in, like I said, I lived in the Sacred Valley for about 3 years, and that area is outside of Cusco. That's in the Andes. And then when I came back from Cusco and came back to the United States, that's when I started the graduate work, the formal graduate work. And then I did about 5 trips to the Amazon, and each trip was about 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna.
Sure.
Larry, are you good? You have
I
any
am.
other? Okay, anyone else would like oh, Jim, go ahead.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, hi.
Thanks, Anna, for your story. Thanks for sharing that. First of all, thank you for bringing that to our group.
Sure.
I'm curious that is this something that the shaman does on a regular basis? You know, it seems like a real gift for them to let somebody come in from the outside, so to speak, and have them go through this experience. Is this something that they normally do, or is this something that you arranged through your school or through your friends from a friend of a friend, or is it something they do on a regular basis?
Everything. So at first, so there are some shaman that are coming from South America. You know, I lived close to Miami, and I lived in Miami. So there are some shaman that are coming from South America that do ceremony in Miami and in other parts of the country. So that's one way to connect, because they'll do, it's not the dieta, it's not the process of the dieta, because that's a very, there's this very specific preparation and also very specific practice after the 2 weeks of the dieta. But they'll do like a ceremony. They'll come for a weekend and they'll do a ceremony, and that's kind of how, or they'll do a presentation. And so that's how some the people in the United States can connect. And so, and they are sponsored by people. That's some like kind of a phenomenon that was occurring, you know, probably like the past 20 years. There's been more interest. And so if somebody in the United States had this connection, they would sponsor the shaman to come and offer ceremony to a group. And it was all very underground as well. You know, it's not, they're not advertising on the internet or anything. It's just very word of mouth and just really keeping everything contained so that it's safe. And so there's that. And then I also connected with people. There's a couple of healing centers in the Amazon that you can connect with, and they offer programs. And so there's just different levels. Like the first time I did a dieta was through a connection that I had with one of my professors at school, an anthropologist. And so he had worked with different shaman. And so then my professor invited me to go. That was the first time. And then there I developed relationships with some of the Shipibo women when I did the project. And then the last 2 dietas that I did were with a master shaman who had trained, you know, since he was 18 years old in the jungle, and he had, you know, a sanctuary, and that was really the most powerful experience. And I'm still connected with this shaman. And although he's not doing these he's just not doing that kind of the dietas anymore. He's doing different kind of work right now. But he's just doing his own personal development right now. And So anyway, there's just different ways to connect. And so what I always say is that when you get the calling, and it's kind of like, I'd like to try that, or, it's kind of like that. And then people, places, and opportunities come forth.
Thank you. Could you tell us how to spell dieta? Is that how you pronounce that?
Dieta, D as in dog,
Okay.
I-E-T-A, dieta.
Great.
And the main master plan is ayahuasca, which you may have heard of. Yeah, it's the ayahuasca dieta. The ayahuasca is from the jungle. So that's probably the most potent place to do the work, is in the jungle. And then in, other regions, they work with the cactus. You'll see the cactus a lot in the Sierra, the Andean Sierra, San Pedro cactus. And people work with that more in the more drier areas of Peru. So it's best to work with the plant in the place where it's native. That's the most powerful way to work with the plant.
I think Irene has a question. Go ahead, Irene.
Yes, I recently, a few years ago, I guess, I had a friend that went to Peru to attend one of those things. And he came back early and he didn't speak much about it. I was wondering, do many people drop out when they get to that jungle with a hammock and no running water and no electricity? Does that happen a lot?
There are people that leave. Yes, that happened a few times. Mm-hmm. And which is fine, it's like, if it's not the time, it's not the time. And it can be very intense. So I saw that happen a few times.
Yeah, he spoke mostly about being very sick, like you said, about the purging. And I think that he went there because he had some ailment that he wanted help with, and it didn't help him. So I think he left early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happens. It's just not the time.
We all want a fast transformation. Mary, go ahead.
Mary, okay. Oh,
We'll get her one
she's
second.
muted.
Yeah, I know. Mary, I'm asking you to unmute. See if you can find your mute button there and unmute. Ah, there you go, I think.
Yeah, my son went to Machu Picchu.
Okay.
And I've seen pictures of it. It's stunning. And I wondered if that relates to what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Because in that area, I mean, I think I may have missed part of your question because you were not muted. So you're specifically asking about the
Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu area. Okay. So that is in the Andes Mountains. Mm-hmm. And so there is another tradition of shamanism there. And again, it's very similar, but it is its own tradition. And this tradition is the people there, the culture group there is the Quero. And
can you spell that?
Q apostrophe E-R-O.
Okay.
Quero. And so they, it's an interesting story because they, when the Spanish conquered, Peru was part of the Spanish conquest, which means that, when the Spanish came in, the Incas were there in this area. Yeah. And the Incas were a conquest culture as well. So they had conquered all the other cultures all along the coast. And, and kind of assimilated all these cultures into the Inca culture. And so when the Spanish came in, they were actually in a civil war. And so that's kind of how the Spanish infiltrated and played each side against the other side. And they got in and took over, basically. So when this was happening, the Quero, they left society and they went up into the mountains at very, very high altitudes. And that's how they preserved their culture, because the Spanish just couldn't even get up there. And so recently, you know, again, in the last 20 years, the Quero have been coming down and coming into Cusco, and Cusco became very, very popular place for travel, for spiritual travel and pilgrimage, and because it's stunning. You know, all of these sites like Machu Picchu, it's amazing to be there. And it's just breathtaking and beautiful and majestic. And so there's multiple sites like this. Machu Picchu is one of the more popular ones, but there's other places that are amazing. And these Quero and the Incas, you know, they worked with what they call the Apus and the mountains. So the mountains are very sacred to them. And so they have these different rites that have to do with receiving these energies from the upper world, you know, so it's the condor, it's a very sacred animal. And they have these different sacred places that are related to the mountains that they work with and the earth. And then they have these beautiful ceremonies, purification ceremonies, where they do give offerings to the earth. And it's a whole process. It's like a prayer, just a series of prayers that are infused into this. It's like a prayer bundle that is then either burnt or in a fire, or, you know, so that the smoke and the energy rises up into the upper world, or it can be an offering to the Earth Mother, and then it would be buried as an offering. So in this culture, nothing is done without an offering to Mother Earth. You know, like if you're going to build a house, you have a ceremony and you ask for the blessing of Pachamama, you know, and you do this ceremony, this offering to the earth. You know, you honor the spirits in the mountains, and also the work with the 4 directions and the upper world and the lower world. And so it's absolutely a shamanic tradition in its own right, you know, and it's related to the land. So the tradition of the jungle is different because it's a completely different land. It's very lush, it's very wet, it's very warm. And whereas in the Andes, it's going to be drier and cooler. And, you know, you're working more with these very high frequencies of these, you know, high altitude sacred places and shrines that they would work with. So it's a very both beautiful, beautiful tradition, very strong culture in Peru.
Thank you.
Another question? Stan looks like he's ready to ask a question.
Actually, I wasn't, but
Oh.
what's fascinating is just sort of a comment that the shamanic traditions, which are very common to multiple indigenous cultures. Our son went on a vision quest, which was in California through ancestral journeys, and it's the same idea. You know, you sit on top of a mountain in a space, and people pray for you, and you sit there without water or drink or anything for 3 days. And he said it was the most incredible experience he's ever had. He wasn't on any psychedelic agents. By the way, there's a great read. I think Michael Pollan's just written a wonderful book about the use of some of these agents, and now psychiatry, they become mainstream. But anyway, I'm not going to ask the question now, but I wonder what the experience would have been without that. I suspect it would have been very similar. Also, you also channel an Indian goddess, if you will. And if you've been to the ashram in India, it's the same kind of experience because you're basically in silence, you're chanting, you have time for reflection, you're basically living in a space with very few comforts. You may or may not have a shower, and if you are lucky to have a shower, it will have warm water. We've had that experience on multiple occasions at an ashram in southern India. And that alone is, in a sense, purifying because you basically
Yes.
are with yourself. And I think that's the main thing. You escaped South Florida, and God bless you for doing that. And that has many different meanings. You know, you're by yourself. When you're in Machu Picchu, one of the things I thought you would mention in the Hall of Healing, you know, it's nothing but a square room with these boxes in the wall, and you chant into those boxes, and it's basically so you get one kind of sound, which is healing, and Mitchell Gaynor's written about this in Sounds of Healing, and the Gayatri mantra, as you know, if chanted in a certain way, is extremely healing. I might talk about the Gayatri mantra someday with the group. So I found your talk fascinating, but I want everybody to know the bad news is if you can't get to Peru, the good news is you can experience that same kind of, how can I put it, transformation, if you will, in other cultures closer to home or elsewhere. So thank you for your talk. It was wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Like, well, just an example right here, Luanne has shared with me how she's a waterfall hunter. And so that process that she does where she goes on this hike, you know, there's this physical purification that occurs, you know, it's not like a stroll down the street. I mean, she's hiking up a mountain and going into these places that are not really that aren't well known, you know, and it's like, it's a whole process to get to that. And then you get to that waterfall and the energy of the waterfall and the blessing of the waterfall. And always in pilgrimage, there's always that gate that you have to go through. You know, you have to climb the mountain, you have to get through something. And sometimes you don't make it. Sometimes you turn back. Sometimes it's not the time. But sometimes when you do overcome the fear or the annoyance even, or the judgment, this is weird, I don't know what they're doing here, I got to get out of here. You know, that also is part of the initiation to move through that. Things that can be irritating. And so all our judgment comes up about how people are wrong and they're doing something wrong. So that can be a very powerful initiation as well. So yeah, I want to learn more about waterfall hunting.
We will do it again, I promise. Does anyone else have a question?
I do.
Go ahead, Carla.
Very brief. When I went to South Dakota, the Dakota Indians have the same belief about the earth. And when their teepee, when they were done, they would pat down the earth. They never left anything but whole when they left, which is the same, what you're sort of saying, honoring the earth. And the other is, you just came up, I wasn't going to mention it. I have a book started called The Aquatic Self, that we're all drawn, we came from water. And you're with a waterfall, when you talk about, watch a baby when they're at the beach,
they will head for the surf. You got to watch them. So we're drawn back into water. And Dr. Emoto, I think, is probably the best resource person about water. Just wanted to mention his name. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. I want to give the people on the telephone a chance to ask questions, so we'll just wait a few seconds to see if anyone has a question coming. Steve or Michael or Jessica, any questions? Let it be. I just have one, well, you guys can interrupt me if you have anything from the phone side, but I have a question. What's the difference between a curandero and a shaman?
A curandero. Well, I think of a curandero as a healer.
Mm-hmm.
But then the shaman, it's more like, it's for me, it's a higher level of, spirit working with the spirit. Whereas the curandero would be more of a healer.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. I don't know if that
Makes
answers
total
your
sense.
question.
Makes total sense. Yeah. Well, it's been fascinating. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we hope you'll come back and talk some more about some other things. In the chat box, I did put Anna's website. And tell us what you're doing now so people have an idea. I know you just wrote a book called Sacred Spaces in Your Own Backyard. And tell us about quantum light practice before you leave us today.
Quantum light practice. So the quantum light practice is kind of something that I'm doing, kind of what Stanley was talking about, that you don't have to go into the jungle and you don't have to take a plant and you don't have, there's many, many ways in everyday life. And that's what the book is about, sacred sites in your own backyard. So, it's getting to a place where you become the sacred site. Your physical vessel is the sacred place. And so I'm working with, because my business started as a travel company where we would travel to sacred places. I would take groups to Peru. I've taken groups to India. I've taken groups to Egypt. But it just so happens that we have not done a trip recently. So everything has gone online. And so then I've come up with some webinars that I teach, and I do shamanic journeys online via Zoom. And I work, I was initiated in offering these sound vibrations, and there's light language. That's what the light language is. Light language is a series of sound vibrations that come forth, and which is it's a channeled transmission. And so that's what I work with instead of the plant medicine. And then we work with the divine feminine, different forms of the divine feminine from all different cultures. So I offer, there's different modules that I do, and each module is kind of centers around a specific archetype, a specific form of the divine feminine. And it's completely multicultural. And so I have some goddesses that I work with from Peru, from Africa. When we do ancestral healing, we work with an African goddess called Ochun. We work with Pachamama. We work with Madrecita Ayahuasca, the vibration of the jungle. We work with the triple goddess from India, and then we work with the Black Madonna. It culminates with the work with the Black Madonna, which is everything. So, so we work with every tradition that is devoted to the Divine Mother. And we do these shamanic experiences online, and it's been really fun and really interesting. And so I'm doing a meetup group, and it's called the Goddess Channeling and Alignment Circle, and I do that meetup group twice a week. And then I offer a webinar. And then I also do private sessions. So if anybody's interested, you can take a look at the website. And also if I have a mailing list, you know, I have a blog that I do, and so you can subscribe to the blog when you go onto the website, if that interests you.
Super, Anna. It was terrific, and we'd love to hear about your adventures with Mary Magdalene too sometime, because that was when we first met. She was going through France with the group and spending all, you know, the whole sacred journey of Mary Magdalene. And so you're a very interesting person, and we just thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. It was wonderful.
Well, Mary Magdalene, I'm very involved with Mary Magdalene right now as we speak.
Okay.
Very, very strong, very mysterious, very powerful, and she's doing a lot behind the scenes right now. Very, very powerful. I mean, I'm seeing her everywhere, personally, all over, doing things. She's very busy.
Good. Mary had a question.
I'd love to talk about Mary Magdalene.
Great. We would love to have you do it. Mary, if you want to unmute, and this will be our last question.
Oh,
Oh,
Wait,
there
there.
she goes. All right.
We can hear you now.
Is that the same Mary Magdalene that, you know, friend of Jesus or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I find her fascinating.
She is amazing. And, you know, it's what I really learned from her is there's so many beliefs about who she is, and
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. You know, she's sovereign. She's her own thing.
I agree.
Yeah. Very powerful being.
That'll be a wonderful talk, and we will have you back to talk about Mary Magdalene.
I'd love to do it. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you all for joining us tonight, especially you, Anna. If anybody needs to reach Anna, I've got her contact information. If you can't find it, it should be on the quantumlightpractice.com site, but you know, you can always reach out to me and I can tell you how to contact Anna. So anyway, you all take care. Hope to see you on Sunday. Have a great week.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining me
Anna.
and for having me.
It was great. We really enjoyed it. Good night.
Good night.